And welcome to a slightly dirty feeling edition of Ben's Junk, but not necessarily in the way that you might think. I'll stop short of using the hard language here, but I do feel like, in a way, I'm OnlyFansing myself in a way by doing this. So let's talk YouTube legalese for a moment here. In the past, I have been approached by manufacturers to review their products, but prior to this, they've always expected me to go and buy whatever piece of equipment, usually at $500 or more, for something that, I would do a Ben's Junk on and never touch again. So obviously, I've always just ignored that stuff. In this case, the manufacturer was willing to provide me with one of the units. Now, I'm still going to mark this video as does not include paid promotion because, one, no money is changing hands here, and two, I don't know what the company policy is, ClonerAlliance that is. If they expect me to return this, I will consult with them again before this video comes out. If they want it back, obviously they can have it. That's only fair. But yeah, I'm going to say this does not include paid promotion. So anyway, let me get around to this in my typically long-winded way. I think I landed on ClonerAlliance's radar when I did the Ben's Junk on the ClonerAlliance Box Pro a couple years ago. So at the time, I was gearing up to do the final History of VHS episode, which was on DVHS. And my machine only does component out, and I didn't have any means of capturing video via component. So I picked that out, and I didn't have any way of doing it via HDMI either. So, kind of dragging myself kicking and screaming into the 21st century a bit. And I've got my little gripes about it, but on the whole, I really like that thing, and it has become a regular everyday part of archive. It's become my modern day equivalent to a VCR, or a DVR would probably be a better comparison, to do off-air recordings, which I really don't do that much, a few times a year. And I use it just when I need that quick bit of footage for a history lesson, or maybe it's a thrifting episode and I just need that little bit of footage from some video I found for the end of the episode, that sort of thing. So anyway, yeah, I think that's how I wound up on ClonerAlliance's radar here. Now, I will tell you straight up, I would not purchase this because it doesn't meet my needs. But if this does what it's supposed to, it might meet yours. That's what we're going to find out here. Now, this is where I say things like I have not recorded anything on this. Thus far, all I've done is obviously open the package. I've made sure that everything was included that was supposed to be, and I have just made sure that it would pass a signal. It would accept a signal and send it out. The only playing with the settings I've done is you have to dig into the menu to switch between component and S-video. That's all I've done. Funnily enough, the ClonerAlliance Box Pro, which is just a bit outside of the shot, does not do S-video. So this does have, I guess, one leg up. But at the same time, I've got my favorite methods of transferring video. I've been doing this for a while now, and you just develop your favorites after a while. And this doesn't do anything that I can't already do and don't just have my comfort zone on. So anyway, with that, we will do recording tests. That'll be the fun part of this. But let's go through the contents of the box. Obviously, we've got the main unit. We've got an 1/8" stereo patch cable because this has 1/8" input and output on it. I used this cable. I ran my iPod into this and it worked just fine. I took my little pair of passive speakers, hooked it into the output, and I was able to get sound out of that, so good on that front. I have not used the provided composite and stereo audio cables. I'd imagine they're okay. They don't feel too cheap, but I've got my favorites on that front too. I like the real nice old thick, heavily shielded ones, and especially ones that don't break off in the TV or the VCR or whatever. Anyway, getting back to this, they were taking into consideration tight angles, so they did provide this right angle HDMI adapter. Otherwise, we got one of those really, really generic, cheap Chinese remote controls. Runs on AAA batteries, not included. I have not attempted to put batteries in this. Otherwise, we got kind of some of the typical paperwork stuff. Now, this is personal preference on my part. I like a real manual, but all we got is just this kind of quick start thing. So if I want the full manual, I got to do the QR code dance, which I personally am not a fan of. Now, I am not going to download that manual unless I need it. So my attitude going into this is, if this is meant for somebody who's just kind of starting out with this, there is no reason that I shouldn't be able to just pick up on this intuitively. Now, if I do need it, if I hit some kind of roadblock, I will download that manual and go from there. But yeah, I'm going to just throw at it what I think the average person would throw at this thing. So I'm only going to do VHS, Betamax, and Laserdisc. I can also do things like Video 8 and some of that, but yeah, we'll stick with just kind of those three biggies. On the ClonerAlliance Box Pro, my main ClonerAlliance device, I can hook up the more esoteric stuff to it, but it never records right. Like, I can run OpenReel EIAJ video to that thing, and it's just a mess. It bounces between different formats, NTSC and PAL and such. It just doesn't work for the real heavy-duty stuff. Now, having said that, if you're dealing in some of that weirder, older stuff, you've probably got your own favorites in terms of video capture already, so I don't think this is designed for you. As such, reiterating that same point over and over again, yeah, we're only going to do the basics with this because I think that's all the average person is going to do with this. With that, let's take a cut here, let's start throwing some stuff at it, and we'll see what we get for results. Okay, I lied. One more little segment here before we start testing. For one, I forgot to mention that this does not run on batteries. I haven't seen any potential compartment for it anywhere. So what do we do for power? One of these. So what is this? USB to USB-C. And then one of those little mini bricks, like you see with, say, a Roku or something like that. So yeah, that's what we got for power. Now, on that note, it also says where you plug it in there, two PCs. So I suppose you could just use this as a middleman between your, say, VHS deck and your computer. But I haven't seen anything to confirm that. I guess I might have to try that just to see if it works. But at the same time, that seems totally redundant because you do have what you would record to, your recordable media, either a flash drive or some small external hard drive, or a TF, a kind of archaic way of saying micro SD. Otherwise, we got our main inputs here, composite or S-video, stereo audio. We do have an HDMI output if you want to use an external monitor, and then auxiliary in and output for that 1/8" stereo patch cable that it came with. Run the audio from or to something else. I guess you could do basic audio-only transfers with this. Anyway, if you give me 2 seconds, I will have this powered up. Through the magic of editing, there we go. And yes, this is one of those deals that just turns itself on when you plug it in, although there is a power button there too. Okay, VCR is on, but it probably wouldn't hurt if I plugged something in. I got my SVHS deck just out of the shot here, but for starters, we'll just do normal old composite. So there we go. Oh, there's the screen from my VCR, the blue screen. Okay. So I'm always inclined to use just a thumb drive to record, but maybe just for a lark, I'll try and do micro SD, which of course is so tiny that my computer won't focus on it. We're just going to deal with some public domain stuff. Turn the volume down so I can use as much footage as I need to. And we got a little silent movie with wonky music going on. All right. Well, it recognized the TF card. I suppose we should... it's kind of stretching out the picture, I noticed. Now, I don't know if that's a setting issue or what, but I guess we'll just go ahead and do a basic record test and see what it gives us. Got the record and stop button here, and I guess it might do stills as well. Okay, we got the notification, if you will, that it's recording. Yes, the image is very, very dark on the tape. That is not the monitor. This is, again, us dealing with public domain stuff, and in this case, a movie that's a little over 100 years old as of my making this. All right, well, 25 seconds. Let's just go ahead and hit stop. Saving. All right. Let's see if we can play back here. We'll select videos. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Okay, there is a short clip on there. So let's go ahead and... yeah, there we go. So I have no idea if that's a bit of stretch-o-vision going on that I need to figure out how to fix, or if that's just a side effect of the monitor, but it is taking video. So let me take a quick break here and I will report back as to how this plays. Okay, ever so slight change of plans here, out of necessity. For one, I am picking this up really a perfect 24 hours after shooting the segment that you just saw finish. And that's because I've been having some problems with this, and also there have been far more tests to do than I realized. I actually only slept a few hours last night. I've been really hard and heavy on this, trying to do the full battery of tests and try and figure out maybe ways around what I see as flaws. And I haven't really been all that successful, but I can't say I didn't give it my due diligence. So this is going to be a very long segment, and I will try not to let this get too boring. I will cut in B-roll and bits of direct feed footage as I go along to illustrate what I'm talking about where I can. But I've got a lot of notes for you here. So I don't want this to be a total downer, so we'll start with the good news. For one, intuitive menu buttons aren't always the most responsive, so good marks on that. As far as formats go with regards to removable media, it's pretty liberal. It seems to do NTFS and FAT32, like my ClonerAlliance Box Pro. You do have some time limitations if you're doing FAT32, but it just can mean a little freeze between long clips as far as I can tell. So success on that part, and there don't seem to be any great limits on the NTFS side of things, aside from having to use a Windows machine. Unless you know a hack that I don't, you might, to get files off of it that way. So, otherwise, the best piece of news is this was able to pass every last thing that I threw at it. Now, the initial plan was going to be just VHS, Betamax, and Laserdisc. I wound up slightly opening the scope to include DVD, and I did that for two reasons. One, to get in some more Macrovision tests. I had already done some VHS Macrovision tests, and to try and throw something not NTSC format, the North American Image Standard, so I could do some PAL footage, European PAL footage. It took it all. So that is a bit of good news. But it just can't overcome my laundry list of issues with this, and I'll just go over some of my general thoughts as well here. Now, I've already been lamenting in this video about the whole aspect ratio issue, because, given the inputs on here, it's only composite and S-video, and if this is really designed more for people to largely be transferring major videotape formats, it's almost all going to be 4:3, so that is kind of a problem. Now, initially I was going to contact the company and try and pick their brains about it and see maybe if there was a hack for it or something. But when I went through my email full of stuff that they gave me, of literature that they gave me, there was a link to a special frequently asked questions page. And one of the frequently asked questions, sure enough, was, how do I do 4:3 aspect ratio footage on this? And it said, oh, just set the resolution to automatic. Yeah, not really. So there are really only two options for resolution on this, automatic or 1080p. And if you do 1080p, if it's 4:3 that you're feeding in, it's always going to get stretched out to full-blown 16:9 widescreen. Now, if you do pick auto, it's a bit of a misnomer. Auto always seems to equal 480p, 720x480. At least that's how your computer will try and interpret it, but it's not really accurate. So what it really is the best thing I can think of to compare it to would be if you are familiar with like European movies from the 60s, and it's just a little widescreen. It's not, this kind of widescreen, but it's not 4:3 TV, old school TV aspect ratio either. Having said that, instead of that just being its natural setting, it's just slightly stretched out. So if you put it within a 4:3 frame, it's going to be letterboxed a little. And if you stick it in a 16:9 frame, you're still going to have the black bars on the side, but they're not going to be quite as big as they would be otherwise. So otherwise, I don't know if this is the actual issue, but I'm just going to say that it's the time-based corrector. I'm going to say there's something overactive in here. So I've been known to lament about DVD recorders, from back in the 2000s, that I'm not always a fan of the TBCs and those things, in that, it's got to fill the gap, so to speak. If there's a flaw in your footage, it's got to do something to keep it from dropping out and causing the audio and video to go out of sync and so on and so forth. So it will just latch onto one frame of footage for maybe half a second on an old DVD recorder, which generally is acceptable. Sometimes it'll be a little nastier about it. But in this case, every little flaw on a videotape, like if you were watching a VHS tape on a TV and you'd have that just truly momentary, split-second glitch, which, like on a DVD recorder, wouldn't mean a thing, this will latch onto it indefinitely. It takes forever to catch up, And it also kind of makes it look like your tape is clogging the heads of your VCR. And that's exactly what I thought was happening when I did my first round of Betamax tests on this. So what happened was it looked like it normally does when I'm about to get a clogged head. So I stopped, took out the VCR, cleaned it. I wasn't getting any gunk though. So I put it back, put the same tape in, played the same bit of footage again, and same result. So I figured I would just eliminate this from the equation for a moment and just run the VCR straight to the TV. And it was just that, split-second little glitch that you see periodically on tapes. But this thing was making a much bigger deal out of that. But it gave me a nice little heart attack. I also thought for a moment that maybe my beta deck was dying on me. But no, it was just this thing being kind of goofy. And also when that sort of thing happens, it can lose audio entirely until it gets itself back together, which can be several seconds. So that's a definite downside. Now, having said that, if you're going back to the TBC thing, if your VCR has built-in time-based correction in it, even if it's really wimpy, it will help considerably. And I was using my JVC, one of my JVC SVHS decks, much later period, late 90s, and it helped quite a bit. But on beta, where on the consumer level, time-based correction didn't really happen, it's a little more of a wild ride, as it were. So running with, I was talking about losing audio for a bit there. Let's talk audio for a bit here. This thing can also really magnify flaws in audio tracks on your tapes. Now on the Laserdisc front, because it's such a good stable signal, it's just not an issue. You will not have any problems in terms of glitches and such if you're doing a Laserdisc transfer. But if you're doing videotape, for one, if your tape has a hi-fi audio track on it, like on my late period JVC SVHS decks, it's a little finicky. So if that tape wasn't aligned perfectly in the factory, it's going to sputter a bit when it goes out of those perfect bounds of hi-fi audio. And in this case, it can magnify that sputter. And if it's something that does not have a hi-fi audio track, it can also magnify the sputtering a bit and even maybe add in sputtering where it wouldn't necessarily normally occur. And otherwise, let's run with audio for a bit here. You can do straight audio transfers with this thing. So I initially just tried, and as you've already seen, hooking up an iPod to this. I can hook up a Discman, and I found you can do kind of old school audio transfers. If you have a Y cable kicking around, 1/8 inch on one end and the red and white plugs on the other, you can hook up a turntable or a cassette deck, and it does just fine with that. Now, having said that, you are a bit low on options for formats in terms of audio format, that is. So there are no uncompressed options. I would really love to see WAVE be an option or AIFF, but it's not here. This only does MP3, and to boot, it will only do a 48 kilohertz sample rate. So if you're thinking of eventually burning an audio CD, you might have to do a little extra work first, because it might not work if you just try and dump it into a CD burner program. And also, it being MP3, it only does garden variety MP3 bit rates. This maxes out at 320 kilobits per second, which is more than acceptable. And if you're only going to be listening on your computer or a phone or something, it's a total non-issue. I will call it perfectly acceptable, just not ideal. If you want to use this in a pinch, I suppose, as a field recorder, I guess you could if you had the right connections to do so with. Otherwise, let's start to move out of flaws and just talk about some of the other stuff going on here. For one, this came bundled with a bunch of software. and about half of it I've already sort of covered on a shallow level. When I did the ClonerAlliance Box Pro review a couple years ago that I actually bought and I use on a semi-regular basis, I covered that stuff as best as I could at the time. And as far as the new to me software goes, I was having some problems in that it doesn't mesh with my setup very well. It is incredibly Windows centric. Now, I own some Windows stuff, but I only own one machine that does modern Windows, as it were. I have one machine that does Windows 10. It dual boots Windows 7 and 10. It's a Sony Vaio from early 2011 and mostly 2010 components inside of it. And unfortunately, I could not make it work with this because the graphics card was too old. The 2010 model NVIDIA GeForce graphics card in that thing, GPU, just wasn't going to happen. Now, one of those pieces of software looked at least interesting enough to try out. It was calling itself AI, artificial intelligence, but instead of writing your book report for you very poorly, it is supposed to smooth out the flaws in a videotape. And I'm not really into that sort of thing. I kind of actually like keeping things pure, as it were. But I could not test it because of the graphics card. It did not recognize it at all. And I took a couple of screenshots along the way. Otherwise, this seemed enticing. This is supposed to be able to be used in tandem with OBS Studio, the live streaming software, which is what I use on those fairly rare occasions where I do a live stream. But of course, I'm doing that on a Mac. Well, you can only do this on the Windows version of OBS. Now, having said that, I wouldn't be using this anyway because if I wanted some auxiliary video, I would want the aspect ratio to be correct, no stretching or whatever. And from what I'm seeing as far as playback and inputs and stuff go, there doesn't seem to be any way around that stretching. So when I do it, I just use an iPad if I need auxiliary video, and I've been known to do that. Now, I did try and check for firmware updates with this, but all I saw was a little thing from ClonerAlliance saying that they are not doing any firmware updates for this particular item. So I guess that one's out the window. Otherwise, let's get a little more petty here for a moment. So it kind of looks like there's two speakers on the bottom. No, there is only one. But at the same time, you wouldn't get any benefit out of stereo for something, this small. But if you do need stereo monitoring, you can just hook up a pair of headphones to it or speakers, and you'll be just fine. Otherwise, I was getting really punchy towards the end of testing this earlier this afternoon. And I, just for a lark, decided to plug something into everything all at once on this. And on the audio front, you're just going to get a mishmash of two things going at once. The audio from, in my case, the VHS deck that I had going in, and then the CD player that I had going into the auxiliary input. You get to hear those both at once. You cannot toggle. But you can toggle between simultaneously running composite and S-video stuff just fine. Again, I was just getting punchy. There was no real great point to that particular test. Otherwise, let me start to wind this down here. I have mentioned throughout this video my ClonerAlliance Box Pro. That thing only costs $20 more than this. So this, as of my making this in September 2023, on Amazon, it's rounded to the nearest dollar, $160. They still make my ClonerAlliance Box Pro, and that currently goes for $180, rounded to the nearest dollar on Amazon. Just spend the extra 20 bucks. You'll get far more options. I mean, I do have my gripes about the other unit, but it more than makes up for it. And if you're just getting into doing transfers and stuff, it's a nice way to start. And you also have the options to do, more modern stuff like HDMI. So yeah, even though you lose the monitor here, which feels more like a novelty to me than anything else, yeah, it's a way more than fair trade. And it can be a bit of a strain to try and watch everything on a 3-inch monitor for any kind of decent period of time. Admittedly, I don't think I did any tests longer than 10 minutes on this thing. So anyway, yeah, I have to say that I'm quite disappointed with this. I can't say I really recommend this. I mean, this very company has a much better option for a similar price point. My one sentence review of this would be jack of all trades and master of none. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start to shut up here, but I will leave you with some, proper clips of direct feed for you here. And any further commentary I have will be in text form. But otherwise, that's going to be it for me on the vocal front for today. I'll talk to you again soon.
Of all evil, of strife and upheaval, but I'm searching, honey, fruit of all evil, of strife and upheaval, but I'm searching, honey.
Le Palais Garnier, home of the Paris Opera for 114 years. Designed by Charles Garnier in 1860.
Burning tears upon a smiling face, she's caught in her fires of spring.
Accurately reproducing those ideas, allowing you to experience the intentions of the artist, requires careful tuning of your audio-video system. There is a correct setup to present information contained in the audio and video signals. Following the setup instructions provided by most consumer equipment manufacturers won't always get you the best possible results. Accurately reproducing those ideas, allowing you to experience the intentions of the artist, requires careful tuning of your audio-video system. There is a correct setup to present information contained in the audio and video signals. Following the setup instructions provided by most consumer equipment manufacturers won't always get you the best possible results.
Denver, Tango 127, we're at Angels 11, bearing 090, over.
Nice going, Mustang. Maneuvers completed. Relax and have one on me.
Roger, Den Mother.
Trouble with your refreshment system?
Den Mother, this is X-Ray Tango 127, we're at Angels 11, bearing 090, over.
Nice going, Mustang. Maneuvers completed. Relax and have one on me.
Roger, Den Mother. Great.
What's the problem, Mustang?
No problem.
Trouble with your refreshment system?
Now, young man, you get your clothes on right away quick. Oh, why don't you dress me? Let that old little baby dress himself.
The water said you're leaving, well, you better leave for good. I see you in the summer with a Tiffany lamp over her head.
Congratulations! You've now adjusted your TV to a higher standard. We're happy to have helped you take control of your audio and video system.